They thought it would be an easy target. A group of loud, reckless bikers rolled into a quiet farming town, eager to stir up trouble and prove their dominance. Their sights landed on an unsuspecting farmer, a man working peacefully in his fields, seemingly oblivious to their arrival. With their engines roaring and taunts flying, they had no idea who they were really dealing with. This wasn't just any farmer. Beneath the straw hat and dusty overalls was a retired tank commander, a man who had faced battlefields far more dangerous than any group of rowdy bikers could imagine. Years of military precision and discipline had prepared him for moments like this, though the bikers wouldn't know it until it was too late. As tension builds and the situation escalates, the farmer quietly prepares. What happens next will leave you questioning who the real underdog is in this surprising encounter. The roar of motorcycle engines shattered the peaceful morning as a group of bikers sped into a quiet farming village. They were looking for trouble, and their eyes locked on a lone farmer tending his field. To them, he was just another easy target, someone they could intimidate for a quick thrill. They revved their engines louder, laughing as they approached, ready to put on a show. But this farmer wasn't what he seemed. Beneath his calm exterior was a man with a past, a retired tank commander who had faced situations far more dangerous than a group of troublemakers. His steady gaze and measured movements hinted at a quiet confidence. The bikers didn't notice. They had no idea they were about to cross someone who had spent a lifetime mastering strategy and control. As the confrontation loomed, the question hung in the air: who would come out on top? The bikers dismounted, their boots crunching on the gravel as they approached the farmer with mocking grins. One of them, clearly the leader, shouted a sarcastic comment about the old tractor parked nearby. The others laughed, their voices cutting through the stillness of the countryside. The farmer didn't flinch. He simply wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the tractor, watching them with a calm that only seemed to irritate the group further. What the bikers couldn't see was the lifetime of experience that lay behind the farmer's steady gaze. Years ago, he had commanded tanks on battlefields where every decision was life or death. He had led soldiers through chaos and learned to read every situation with precision. Now, as the bikers closed in, he was quietly assessing them, every movement, every word, calculating his next step. The air grew heavier, the tension rising as the standoff continued. The leader of the bikers stepped forward, his smirk widening as he tried to size up the farmer. "Nice little setup you've got here," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Bet it'd be a shame if something happened to it." His companions chuckled, their confidence growing as they loomed over the farmer. The farmer didn't respond right away. Instead, he let his eyes sweep over the group, noting their restless movements and the way they kept glancing at their leader for direction. He recognized the pack mentality. They drew strength from their numbers, but he could tell they weren't used to real challenges. Behind him, the faint hum of an approaching vehicle caught his attention. His neighbor, an older man in a dusty pickup, slowed down to watch the scene from a distance. The farmer raised a hand, a subtle gesture to signal everything was under control for now. The bikers noticed the interaction, their smirks fading slightly. "What's the matter?" One of them jeered. "Need backup." The farmer finally spoke, his voice steady and low. "I've seen worse than you." It wasn't a threat, but the weight of his words seemed to hang in the air, unsettling the group just enough to pause their advance. The leader narrowed his eyes, trying to read the man standing before him. "You think you're tough, old man?" he challenged, stepping even closer. But as the farmer locked eyes with him, it became clear. This wasn't a man who needed to prove himself. This was a man who was ready, even if they didn't know what for. The tension crackled, a storm on the verge of breaking. The air felt electric as the farmer stood his ground, his calm demeanor unnerving the group more than any outburst could. The leader's bravado faltered, but he quickly covered it with a loud laugh, signaling his crew to spread out. They began circling the farmer like vultures, kicking up dirt with their boots and revving their engines to rattle his nerves. Still, the farmer didn't move. From the corner of his eye, He noticed his neighbor's truck still idling nearby, a silent witness to the escalating tension. The farmer gave a small nod, barely perceptible, but the old man in the truck understood. He slowly drove off, leaving the farmer alone with the bikers. That was exactly how the farmer wanted it. No one else in harm's way. The leader stepped even closer now, trying to assert dominance. "What's your deal, old man? Think you're smarter than us?" He spat, frustration creeping into his voice. The farmer tilted his head slightly, as if weighing his response. "I think you've already underestimated me," he said simply, his voice steady but firm. The leader's face hardened, and he gestured to his crew. "Let's teach him a lesson." The bikers closed in, their taunts growing louder as they tried to intimidate him. But the farmer had already calculated every angle, every move. He was no stranger to being outnumbered. As they drew closer, the farmer reached behind him, pulling out an old, weathered radio from his tractor. With a flick of the switch, static crackled to life, and a voice came through, calm, precise, and familiar. It wasn't a distress call, it was a signal. And in that moment, the bikers realized they weren't the ones in control. The static on the old radio faded, replaced by a calm, commanding voice that carried a tone of authority. "Eagle, this is base. Confirm your status." The bikers froze, their laughter abruptly cut short. The farmer, unshaken, pressed the button on the side of the radio. "Base, this is Eagle. Everything's under control. Stand by for further instructions." His voice was steady, almost casual, but the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. The leader of the bikers hesitated, glancing nervously at his crew. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" He barked, trying to regain control. But the unease was spreading among the group. They exchanged wary glances, their earlier confidence slipping away as they realized they had underestimated their target in more ways than one. Before the leader could speak again, the distant rumble of engines grew louder. These weren't motorcycles, they were heavier, deliberate, and unmistakably military. The bikers turned their heads, eyes widening as the outline of vehicles appeared on the horizon, growing larger with each passing second. The farmer's expression remained calm, but there was a glint in his eyes now, a quiet satisfaction that spoke volumes. He leaned back against his tractor, arms crossed, as the vehicles drew closer. "I told you," he said, his voice low but clear. "You've already underestimated me." Panic rippled through the bikers. They hadn't just picked the wrong target, they had stepped into something much bigger than they could have imagined. The rumble of engines grew deafening, and the tension reached a breaking point as the farmer's reinforcements came into full view. The military vehicles came to a halt, their engines rumbling as a group of uniformed men stepped out. They weren't armed for battle, but their presence was commanding, each one moving with practiced precision. The bikers looked on in stunned silence, their bravado completely stripped away. The leader of the group turned to the farmer, his voice shaky now. What is this? Who are you?" he demanded, though the fear in his tone betrayed him. The farmer stepped forward, his calm demeanor unchanged. "I'm someone who knows when to call for backup," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. One of the officers approached, saluting the farmer. "Commander, we're here as requested," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The biker's jaws dropped. They had dismissed him as an ordinary farmer, but now they stood face to face with a man who had once commanded entire battalions. The farmer looked at the bikers, his gaze steady and unrelenting. "You came here thinking you could push someone around," he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "But there's always someone stronger, smarter, and more prepared than you realize." He gestured to the officer, who nodded in understanding. The bikers flinched as the officers stepped forward, but instead of arresting them, they handed each one a small envelope. Confused, the leader tore it open, revealing a card with a single sentence. Asterisk. "Consider this your first and final warning." Asterisk. It wasn't the confrontation they had expected. It was a chance to walk away and rethink their actions. As the military vehicles began to leave, the farmer turned back to his field, his work unfinished. But before the bikers could retreat, he called out over his shoulder, "And remember, next time, I won't need backup." They didn't wait to find out what he meant. The bikers didn't look back as they scrambled onto their motorcycles and rolled away, their earlier swagger replaced by quiet, shaken urgency. The farmer stood in the middle of his field, watching them disappear into the distance. His expression remained calm, but there was a quiet satisfaction in the way he adjusted his hat and returned to his work. For him, the matter was resolved. The neighbor's truck reappeared on the dirt road, the driver rolling down his window with a chuckle. "Didn't even break a sweat, did you?" he called out. The farmer smiled faintly. "No need. Sometimes a little strategy is all it takes." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the field returned to its peaceful rhythm. The farmer's past and present had collided for a brief moment, leaving an impression on everyone involved. But for him, life carried on, just as it always had.